she did point the finger at him when it comes to the Epstein files, even though former Attorney General Pam Bondi said in all caps it was not true. Turns out it was absolutely true. And I have the proof to show you in this video. And that's because finally, the House Oversight Committee released the 111-page transcript of Pam Bondi's interview by both Democrats and Republicans over her handling or mishandling of the Epstein files while she was still in office. Now, I'm going to talk about what she did say about the files in a second. But when it comes to pointing the finger at Trump's acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, I want to show you the receipts. First, on page 23, Bondi said he, as in Blanche, was leading the Epstein matter and the release of everything from the beginning. Page 27, when trying to get answers about releasing the files as required under the Epstein Files Transparency Act, Bondi said Todd Blanche supervised that entire process. Page 29, Todd Blanche oversaw the entire investigation. When asked who decided what to redact from the Epstein files, she said on page 33, I believe that is listed in one of Todd Blanche's memos, and he was in charge of the process and the entire release of the Epstein files. And then on page 34, I believe Deputy Attorney General Blanche laid out those guidelines for the reviewers, the attorneys who reviewed the material. Do you want me to go on? Because there's plenty more where that came from. But I think you get the point. After Democrats called her out for pointing the finger at Todd Blanche during a break in her testimony, Bondi came back on the record, and then she started praising Todd Blanche, saying, Todd Blanche is one of the most highly ethical individuals I know, and I think he's making an incredible acting Attorney General. And then she said he did an excellent job rolling out the Epstein files. So I think it's pretty clear she absolutely pointed the finger at Todd Blanche. She did it repeatedly. She said he was the one who oversaw every aspect of not only the Epstein investigation, but he was the one who handled the rules for what was and was not redacted. She said he was the one who decided to withhold about 3 million Epstein documents that are still not released to the public. And she said he decided which documents would be privileged and are still hidden from even members of Congress, which is, by the way, not allowed under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And when it comes to Todd Blanche's interview of Ghislaine Maxwell and her convenient transfer out of a Florida maximum security prison over to a lower security prison in Texas, Bondi said she had nothing to do with that. She claims she learned about the transfer of Maxwell in the newspaper or online. Keep in mind, when all of this was happening, Pam Bondi was the Attorney General of the United States. Todd Blanche worked for her, and she testified that she was well aware of Blanche's 2-day interview with Maxwell, but then she claimed she had no idea that Maxwell was going to be transferred to the lower security prison almost immediately after Blanche interviewed her. But she was very clear when asked whether Ghislaine Maxwell should receive a pardon from President Trump. Bondi said, no, I believe she should die in prison because she was a monster like Jeffrey Epstein. And speaking of President Trump, his name came up a lot during this interview of Pam Bondi. Lawmakers asked several times whether Trump was aware of what Blanche was doing with these Epstein files, whether he knew about Epstein's crimes prior to them becoming public knowledge, whether he had a say in what documents were redacted, and whether he knew or had anything to do with Maxwell's transfer to Texas. But every single time, Bondi shut it down. She refused to disclose any conversation she had with President Trump. And then when pressed by lawmakers, Bondi's lawyer, who just so happens to still work for President Trump at the Department of Justice as a sitting assistant attorney general, she stepped in, repeatedly objecting to the questions and repeatedly saying she, as in Pam Bondi, is not going to answer that. Bondi did say that the House Oversight Committee should talk to acting FBI Director Kash Patel about the extent of the FBI's investigations into names that were found in the Epstein file. She said the committee should also talk to the Bureau of Prisons about why Maxwell was transferred. And she said, as I reported, the committee needs to talk to Todd Blanche. And now that President Trump says he's going to nominate Todd Blanche to be the Attorney General, senators will absolutely get that chance because once he's officially nominated, he will have to go through the Senate confirmation process. And you better believe those senators are going to have a lot of questions that Todd Blanche will have to answer, or he's not going to ever be Attorney General. So if you want to read the transcript of Pam Bondi's interview for yourself,